Last but not least, our next presenter for this TED Talk session will be Michael Bruccoleri, who's a PhD candidate in the lab of Jean Vacher. Notre dernier présentateur aujourd'hui sera Michael Bruccoleri, qui est candidat au PhD dans le laboratoire de Jean Vacher. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. Okay, so before I start, I just want to say I'm like so thrilled to be here today. I'm so glad that there's so many of you, and even the people that are watching by Zoom. I just want to say, like, I really appreciate it, and thank you all. So I'll be talking to you about a secret superhero in your bones. And although it looks a bit scary, like an alien or like a squid or octopus, it's actually a really great fellow over here. So this is the osteocyte. It's in all of us, and it has mechanosensitive properties. And when it senses tension from all the activities that you do, walking, jogging, or lifting heavy weights, then it will relay messages throughout your bones and throughout your body in order to decrease body weight, specifically fat, by reducing your appetite, letting yourself use your own energy reserves. So as bones are the central topic in all of this, it's good to at least get an idea of what bones are. So it's actually kind of a difficult thing to describe. So your bones are actually a combination of two main things. One that makes it a bit malleable, capable of bending, one that makes it brittle. So I once asked a friend of mine exactly what is bone tissue? What is it? So I guess I hit his Achilles heel by asking that question, because he kind of just gave up really quick and he was like, oh, Michael, I don't know, just throw me a bone here. So I took a bone and I threw it out. No, I'm joking. I didn't actually throw it, but I did figuratively throw him a bone, give him a few hints, but most people actually have trouble with it. So here it is. You could take this pitch with you and you could use it for, anytime that you're at like a dinner party or something. You could be kind of a star of the show. You could describe what bones are. So bones are very simply an interwoven mesh of collagen, kind of tied up like a rope in a triple helix. And this meshwork of collagen is thoroughly embedded in a salt crystal lattice made out of calcium phosphate. So that's very simply it. And uniquely, the calcium phosphate is called hydroxyapatite. So if you're at a dinner party, then technically your guest will be in the appetite for learning bone physiology, but never mind that. So these are the components of bone. You'll notice there's also a component of water all the time. You may be asking yourself, why would there be water? And the reason why is because your bones are actually an ecosystem, a live ecosystem. So even your teeth, they have to be surrounded by water. All bones have to be surrounded by water. And that's because they're alive. So what are these tissues that are alive? What are these cells? They are the osteoblasts, the osteoclasts, and the osteocyte. And they all kind of work kind of like members of a construction site. So the osteoblasts will single-handedly create bone. They will release collagen, that's a protein component, and they will have a protein on their cell surface called alkaline phosphatase. And this will cut up phosphate dimers and turn them into monomers. And then you end up precipitating calcium phosphate, sprinkling it all over the collagen. It's almost like a nice little Disney fairy tale. It's actually nice, and it builds up to something very beautiful. And that's what keeps us kind of up and alive right now. So the osteoblast is like the builder, but the osteoclast is like the demolitionist. So it'll purposefully destroy it all in order to make it bigger, better, nicer, without fractures. So it'll do this by releasing little bubbles, little vesicles full of acid that will then break apart the calcium phosphate matrix, and then also release proteases to cut up the collagen. So it'll single-handedly get rid of your protein and mineral component. Now, your osteocytes, they're present. They will have projections through little tunnels of the bone called caniculi, and they will sense the tension and then organize responses to change the activity of your osteoblasts or your osteoclasts in order to make them either work more or work less. They tend to activate more of the osteoblasts more often. So you could consider the osteocyte as a very experienced supervisor at this area. So it lived its life as an osteoblast, and now it doesn't have to do manual labor anymore. They could just sit back and then tell people what to do. Now, people want to know, is there another role deeper down or perhaps in another area of the body? So they constructed a transgenic mouse that was capable of removing these osteocytes within the bone. They did this by having two genes inserted. One is an incomplete gene, DTR, that stands for diphtheria toxin receptor. That way, if you inject diphtheria toxin into the mouse, then the mouse will die. But since this is not complete, it has a stop sign in it, it will not actually produce the receptor. So the cells are fine. Now, if you have the second gene, which is dumpy-1 promoter pre-recombinase, then something very dumpy happens for your osteocytes, because this is a promoter that's specific to the osteocyte. So only the osteocyte will have the pre-recombinase, so then only the osteocyte will die. It'll end up cutting up and recombining that gene DTR. So now you have both genes present, you now lose your osteocytes. This works with about 80% efficiency, but that's all that you need to really learn about any effects that's happening within other tissues. So we found that there's certain effects in tissues like T cells and in B cells, also in fats specifically. So if you were to do an exercise model that was done in a research paper by Jansen and Olson in 2018, they measured the effect of exercise on mice that had the osteocytes removed and in normal mice. So if you have a pair of normal mice, you insert a weight inside the mouse such that every time that it's doing exercise, by walking basically, they'll eventually lose fat mass. This happens in about 2 weeks. So we're expecting to see either something different or the same when you remove osteocytes. Turns out when you remove osteocytes, you now do not lose weight. When you have your weight inserted, the mouse does not lose fat after it walks around and does its exercise. So you do the same amount of exercise, but when you don't have osteocytes, you cannot lose those pounds. You can't lose that fat. So what this indicates for us is that potentially within our bones, there's a spark, there's a light, there's a fire that could burn fat throughout your body. It does so through potentially altering your appetites, according to this publication, such that you're less likely to consume new calories and therefore use your own bodily reserves. So this is an important feature for all of us in order to make use of the cell that we have before we lose it. Because as you age, you'll eventually lose your own osteocytes, because the same stem cells that turn into the bone building cells and osteocytes can turn into fat cells. If you have low insulin sensitivity and high insulin, you'll actually make fat cells. You might be a bit like this mouse model over here. So if that happens, even if you do your exercise, you won't actually be able to lose the weight. So it's important to make use of it earlier. Use it now. Use that fire within you so that you could burn those pounds while you still have them. And one very important thing to know is that it could be any sort of activity. So even today, right now we're all sitting. One thing that you could all do right now, you could take a stand. Literally and figuratively, you could take a stand. And if you take a stand and do your work, take a stand and do anything, you're actually going to have tension felt in your bones, specifically in your osteocytes. It's something that we could all do. But society forces us to sit down all the time, sit down during presentations. We should be more liberal even with this. Some of us should be capable of standing, because us sitting down the entire time is like a compromise on ourselves. So keep in mind, even standing, that could make an impact. Walking, jumping, lifting weights, all these things allow you to make use of that superhero within you. And one also very, very important thing, if someone ever tells you that bones cannot help you to lose weight, remember, I have a bone to pick with them.